executive committee meeting for PlanRVA. Can we get a roll call and certification form?
Sure. Gilbert, are you with us?
Okay.
Mr. Coda? Mr. Winslow?
Aye. Here.
Dr. Newville?
Here.
Mr. Sharp?
Here.
Mr. Davis? Reverend Nelson? Mrs. Page? Here. Mr. Byerly?
Here.
And Ms. Abbott, I believe you're here for Dr. McGraw this morning.
I am. Good morning.
Great, great to have you, thank you. Get that out. Okay, we have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last meeting? Should be in your packet here.
Mr. Chair, I move for approval of the minutes from our last
Motion.
meeting.
Second. And a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Old business. Martha, we have our update on the new office space. I know that the committee met this week, and I'm sure there's an update on that one.
Yeah, so activity is progressing with architectural design. Baskerville is our architect on that project, and they're moving forward. We've been working with our AV team. Productive AV is the firm that installed the equipment that's here, so we've been asking them to help us spec what the relocation of our equipment over to the new site, and working with our IT managed services provider, Proxios, to review all the design specs, make sure we've got power and data in the right location on the design plans and everything like that. So that's moving forward. All that input gets compiled together, and yesterday the committee met and selected Baskerville also to do the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So we've got the notice to that, and we'll be signing the contracts, I think, later this afternoon.
So Baskerville's running the whole show.
They are, and so that'll kind of, I think, create a little bit more of kind of a seamless integration of those items, and the expectation is that that will eliminate sort of the potential for architectural designs not to match up with the infrastructure. So, yeah. We also did at the staff level just consult recently with Chesterfield County's procurement department, talking about sourcing furniture and that kind of thing. And so I was able to get some really helpful information from Stephanie about how to go through the bulk contract procurement process. So that was really, really helpful, and she was very encouraging on that. So we're investigating two well-known sort of these bulk purchasing directories. One's called Sourcewell, the other one's called Omnia. Both of them have a really wide range of furniture vendors, and so we'll be able to work with our local dealer, Creative, on that, but still go through a competitive process to be able to get the best deal on the furniture that we need. But Creative will help us spec everything, which is pretty critical, because if you're just, as you can imagine, thumbing through the inventory from the various suppliers, it's just totally infinite options. So they'll be helping us with that. As I said, Audit Facilities and Finance Committee met yesterday. Really, the MEP was the only item on the agenda yesterday, but after that meeting, we did have a presentation from Baskerville on the proposed color palette and some materials. So actually, I've got the things that they brought over to the office yesterday.
Looks like blues and grays.
It is. So kind of a gray palette for the carpeting, for the majority of the carpeting, with accents of this sort of like purpley blue. We're leaning toward the blue a little bit, like a blueprint blue, as opposed to the purple that's in our logo, just so we're not overly purple. So, you know, it'll be akin to a lot of the color palette that you see in the current office, probably less browns, but gray. And then the base wall coat will also be kind of like a light gray white with accents, and they've started to talk about different options that we could consider for sort of art treatments and some things like that to be able to make certain points of the office sort of draw the eye and create that welcoming feel. So it was kind of an exciting thing yesterday. They wanted to get sort of general okay with that theme and the palette. So I would love to get your all's input if you want to pop over there and sort of look. I did have a chance to tour a couple of office spaces of other organizations that have recently made a move, and I'm picking their brain about some lessons learned about colors and things like that. So yesterday, for example, they pitched a a white solid surface or a white, like Formica countertop. From talking to some other folks that also were attracted to that, they have counseled me that the white solid surface stains with coffee. And so we want to be, so we're learning as we go on some things like that from lessons learned. So we'll be adjusting a little bit, but and then we'll be working to be able to get some pricing on these things. So we're looking at things like back of house laminate countertops, maybe front of house where we're going to have a little bit more heat and water with coffee and beverage. Maybe that's where we do a solid surface, but try to be cost conscious with those material costs and where we do, where it's necessary to do maybe a higher cost material versus in other parts of the office where it's not going to matter as much. Let's see what else on that. We're continuing to work through the various options with regard to the post move out of here and holdover versus alternative sites. So we have a couple of options for hosting meetings that have been presented to us. So I'll be able to get that to the finance committee to look over those things. I think I already shared this with you, but just in case I didn't, the property owner of our new site does have warehouse storage. So they've agreed that they could hold our things for us on delivery of new things, but also furniture if that's an option that we want to pursue. And we found some leads on some pretty competitively priced moving for companies. So we haven't done the official quoting yet, but it looks like there's going to be some good options for us there too. So, yeah.
Any comments or questions for Martha on that? Board members? Very good. Then we'll skip to RRTPO update.
Thanks. So I think at your table you'll see, and apologies to those that are online, we'll get this emailed to you, but there's a letter that Mr. Williams approved. And if you were in the TPO meeting, Dr. Newbo, last week, you're already aware of this. This letter came from Mr. Williams and it's addressed to Chair Thornton and Chair Winslow for PlanRVA and the CBTA. And it really drives out of the committee that Chair Dr. Newbill chaired for the TPO, coming up with this concept of hosting an annual joint meeting across PlanRVA, the TPO, and the CBTA. So this is the official invitation for PlanRVA to participate in that as a board. And so I think what might be appropriate would be for this executive committee to review this. I think Mr. Winslow, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you're on board with the concept. And so from an administrative perspective, my questions would be, how do you want to handle your meetings in June? If you would prefer to use the annual meeting as the get together for June. We are in a position from a staff perspective to be able to have the agenda flow between this month and May, so that if you chose to cancel the June 9th meeting, that would be okay. It wouldn't create a mission kind of issue.
And that's the regular meeting and the executive meeting?
And it's your choice. So we have it as a discussion for executive committee about the executive committee meeting and your recommendation about the full commission. And then we have this on the agenda for the full commission to also, it's the chair's prerogative, or by, I'll put it this way. The bylaws say that the chair can cancel up to 2 meetings. And so we always try to, if we have advance notice about the opportunity to cancel, we try to bring it to the body as opposed to putting the chair in a position to have to do that. And so that if there's an emergency, he has those, has that availability.
I guess I'd want to hear from folks on that. I mean, one of the things I definitely know we need to keep a short leash on is this, the new space. And so, wonder out loud if the executive committee should just keep a date. Maybe we may be able to cancel the full commission if we can conclude our business in May, and I guess have whatever gap there is until Sean will take over here pretty soon, and then he'll meet. I think his first meeting will be in
July. We would do the election and transfer.
So I guess for those, Mr. Byerly, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Do we need to sort of keep that placeholder for an executive to hear from the audit committee, facilities audit?
I would think so. I think you need those opportunities for communication because there's so much activity going on with the move and the construction and everything that we've got to do. We need to have that to be able to keep the communications flowing. We don't want to miss a meeting and then our communications falter and then, we've got a problem or a situation. So that would be my opinion on it.
Anybody, any other comments on that? I tend to agree, and so I think, Dr. Newman?
I would concur as well. Yeah, I was just going to say I would concur the executive committee, but then we can have the larger meeting thereafter.
All right. Well,
So I'm hearing keep the executive committee meeting on the schedule for June 9th, so that we can keep the updates happening with regard to the office days. But there might be an openness to propose to the full commission if they desire to cancel that meeting in lieu of the big
and we can
annual
bring
meeting.
that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So, all right. That sounds good to me. Great.
So from a next step perspective on the annual meeting, just so that you all are aware, especially those of you that sit across all three bodies or two bodies, as you know, you're on distribution lists and that kind of thing. So we have, for purposes of the annual joint meeting, we've combined all of those distribution lists. So you will get one invitation in the Outlook calendar system from rrtpo@planrva.org. So that should come out in the next, 2 business days or so. So just be aware of that. I think due to the content, we would request that people attend in person. We're looking at locations, and we definitely want to make sure that we have the ability to record audio and visual and live stream. But as you know, when you go to different locations, the ability to have members communicating through a virtual meeting system gets more and more complicated and more expensive. So
Sure.
I think our hope would be that this content would lend itself well to in-person communication if possible. And certainly if folks need to have the accommodation of the remote participation, we'll work on that. But it's just know that's a challenge when we go to different spaces.
I assume that we have an agenda sort of outline that brings all of these organizations together for everyone, so that they understand what each organization is doing and how they're all interconnected. That's one of the goals, I presume.
That's right.
This meeting.
So I think we're gonna attempt to create material and content that can be released as part of this branding effort and some things like that, to be able to help pull those pieces together, particularly as each member goes out back into the community. You'd have material to be able to share, with your colleagues on your boards or members of the public, what have you. In addition to that, we want to be able to take the opportunity to take a look back over the last year and the accomplishments of each of the three bodies. What's that tangible work that each have done, and then what's the sort of look ahead. We're not going to get into the weeds of what each individual organization has in its work plan, but more kind of like, what are the things that tie these organizations together, and what are we all collectively working for?
So there's a strategic
That's
framework.
right. So we can kind of pull up to the 30,000 foot, so that when we get back into the business in July and August, everybody has a clear sense of how the different entities, work together to move the big ball forward, if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. Any comments on that? Okay. All right. Well, that looks good, and we look forward to, I guess, with that draft, seeing that draft. Agenda.
Yeah, I'll be
Sure,
working
first.
closely with you, and then certainly with Mr. Williams to be able to kind of finalize it. But our hope is that we can get that save the date out, like I said, in the next business day or two, so everybody has a chance to add this Thursday to their calendar for those that don't normally have that on their calendar. And then by the end of the month, we hope to have the location locked in so that we can give everybody a sense of where we'll be hosting it.
Okay. And with our budget overview, which is just,
Yes.
I should just call on you once instead of.
That's all right. So as far as the budget goes, in light of kind of this plan, I'm still operating under the intention to present the budget for next fiscal year to our finance committee at their meeting on April 26th. And then it would flow to this body at the May meeting, and then flow to the full body also at the May meeting. So that if the full body does decide to do that cancellation in June, we will have already worked our way through the budget and work program process for next fiscal year. So I did want to be able to give you a little bit of an overview about approach this year and just some, missing pieces that we have still, and frankly, get your temperature on a couple of things that we'd like to incorporate into the presentation for the Finance Committee. So in general, revenues are expected to remain pretty steady. We have confirmation of some, not all, because as all of you are in the same boat, we're waiting for
State
what the
budget.
General Assembly is going to decide to do. Funding for planning district commissions looks very different between the House and the Senate. Neither of the budgets for planning district commissions are proposed to be cut. So it's really a matter of, are we expecting to have additional revenue or kind of level? So that's the good news about that. It's not, at this point in time, we don't appear to be in any sort of a state of needing to reconcile. But as you guys know, the Senate and the House budgets are very, very different, and where each house have chosen to support their initiatives look a lot different. So it doesn't mean that we're completely safe. That's kind of a big question mark, and we're watching that closely. So that being said, we are assuming fairly level revenue. I feel like that's kind of the best thing that we can do at this point. We do have the majority of our funds are passed through from federal government and some things like that. So while we could have delays in awards and notifications and things like that because of the state budget process, I don't know that for us it's going to necessarily translate to like whole dollars. It just could be a timing issue. So we're watching that pretty closely. Our housing grant, as you know, it's a 3-year commitment from Virginia Housing, so we're not in worry for that funding. That's already been obligated and available to us. Renewals for grants supporting our environmental programs and emergency management are in the process. We submitted all of the emergency management grants at the end of March, environmental grants at the end of March. Our emergency management grants, that opportunity will open. It opens depending on the state agency anytime between early May and late August typically. So we're just kind of keeping our eyes open for that and getting prepared. We do have funding levels confirmed from VDOT and DRPT to support the MPO program. That's about 2/3 of our budget. So that's really great news. And Mr. Parsons is working on the final touches of that work program that'll come to the TPO's Technical Advisory Committee in May, and then it will be an agenda item at the TPO meeting at the June annual meeting. And then we're working on the content of that MOU that we discussed at length last month for the CBTA. Eric and I are working on that. And so, I do expect that that'll go forward. And so while that is for the PDC operations cost, I want to make sure it's clear to everybody from a budget perspective, the dollars flowing from CBTA to PlanRVA will be more, but most of those dollars will be to take on the new executive director position. So the actual net to the PDC will actually be less. So we're working through the implications of what that is and how that flows through to our different line items with the different structure that we're talking about with funding.
So go ahead, Ms. Page.
So why would the dollars be more? I mean, how does the executive director of CBTA affect the dollars being more? Is it because of the salary?
Yes.
Or
So
because
the
they'll be
CBTA
leasing space or?
So the CBTA executive director will be our employee,
Right.
and so we'll be reimbursed for the whole of that cost. So it's a neutral for us, but it means the flow of funds from CBTA to PlanRVA will be larger because that salary is larger than what's been paid historically. But the services that we're providing outside of the executive director are less because the executive director is coming on. So Mr. Parsons and I will be spending less time supporting the CBTA because this executive director will be there in place of what we've been doing.
Okay, so aren't they are they leasing an office, or because they're an employee, they get an office in this new facility?
We set up the budget that we are proposing that there be an offset to cover expensive office space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that if we're going to talk about that, we're not talking about just the salary, but we're talking about everything that entails CBTA.
We're coming through kind of all of those costs, and what the most transparent way is to pass on the additional expenses that PlanRVA is incurring due to our support of.
Because you're not like a detailed budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Eric and I have been pouring through some nitty gritty on that.
That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things that are incorporated in our working draft right now that I wanted to get your temperature on. And I know many of your jurisdictions have been deliberating on some of the same issues, but one is salary increases for staff. So I've been kind of monitoring what's been happening at the local level, and I know some of that has been difficult, especially because your local connections to what the state decides to do for employees is inherent to your budgeting process. Social Security Administration in January did release that cost of living increase was 5.9%. And so we would be requesting, I would like to start at a request of the board to consider a 5.9% increase for our staff effective July 1. So that's item number one. We've been looking at different ways that we could deal with cost of living and the significant cost of living that's occurred and is projected to occur over this fiscal year period. As well as the realities around the importance of recognizing performance and merit of employees. And so in addition to that COLA increase, we would like to establish a $20,000 merit pool, but we'd like to hold off on awarding that until later in the fiscal year. We've done that in past years just to be able to get a little bit of a better sense of how the finances are going this fiscal year. And the proposal is that $20,000 merit pool be allocated in the form of a one-time salary adjustment. So maybe commonly known as like kind of a bonus, which also helps us be able to, because of that 5.9% that we're proposing effective July 1, an additional merit on top of that creates kind of a situation where that might be difficult for us to sustain in fiscal year 2024. So we thought that could be a good compromise, and in calculating, sort of looking at projections of what those merit increases would be, frankly, to employees, it might be more appreciative because it's like a one-time sum that they can actually realize, as opposed to something that's spread over 26 pay periods. It doesn't always feel like it means a lot.
Yes, Ms. Davis.
Thank you. So, and I'm not splitting hairs, but you said salary adjustment, you said merit increase, but I think we need to be clear, that would be a bonus because it would not roll over into, okay.
Yes.
And then what's our annual payroll?
Our annual payroll right now is, I think the budget is 1.8 million.
Okay.
So with the increases, if I know where you're headed, with the increases, with the new position, with the CVTA executive director, that's kind of a neutral, and with two positions that I want to talk about in this proposal.
CVTA, they're going to do their own salary adjustment or.
Yeah, that'll be completely kind of a wash. So when you exclude that and you just think about sort of the core of our organization, this projected payroll is with that merit pool, if I'm not mistaken, right at 2 million.
$1.8.
Yeah, it goes from 1.8 for this fiscal year because we were able to budget based on delayed start of positions that we established, and then with the increases, the fully loaded roster of employees.
Yeah, so it's about $105,000, $106,000 increase for that 1.8 times 0.059. So the only
It's not
issue.
even, but she's saying, what Martha's saying is that's including whatever the possible salary is for CVTA.
No, excluding.
Even if it did, that would just be a pass-through, though. That would,
Okay.
we'd be kind of the fiscal agent, I guess, for that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a wash. You know, one of the issues that we look at, and there are times where sometimes, because of what we're dealing with, the cost of living and those types of things, you don't always have, and it's just something for us to consider. You're not always able to make up some of the things that are taking place that are out of your control. You know, there are a lot of folks that can't do the 5.9. I just think that's something we have to consider. If we can, then that's something to look at. But some of the folks who are footing the bill for that are not able to do the 5.9 for their folks. Out in the private sectors, and even some of the localities are not able to do that. And just in Hanover, we had a budget amendment 2 weeks ago for $300,000 for an additional fuel increase. And then when we got time to vote on the budget, they said we got another budget amendment, we need another $100,000 on top of the $300,000. And sometimes you just can't, and we saw that before, people are cutting hours. So it's just something to consider. I'm not opposed to that 5.9, but some of the folks who are paying that, the taxpayers, aren't able to do that. We may need to consider that as we also look at these bonuses as well. And there's no question that certain pay bands are going to be hit harder, particularly with fuel and groceries right now. And I recognize that. Maybe it just needs some discussion, but I'm certainly not opposed to it. But I'd feel better if it was discussed.
Yeah, that's frankly why we're bringing it up in this way.
Yep, we're discussing it.
Yeah, because-
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, I think we always try to be conscious of what the jurisdictions are doing and what they're able to do. And, I think every locality has been struggling with how you deal with compensation. And so I think we want to be, my goal would be to be in line with the jurisdictions, but also, figure out what's right for this organization.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, I'm not opposed to it. We just increased on the county side. We have a $15 minimum wage in Hanover, but almost everybody in our organization has some type of skilled labor. Those even outside of administrative duties have some type of specialized skilled labor. But it's just something to consider. I mean, if every year it's indexed to, I don't know. And I just don't know how much farther we can go if we index it to that, because what happens if it continues to go, we're going to be able to make that whole. So just a thought. Thanks, sir.
Dr. Newbill?
Yes, I was going to say, yeah. I mean, certainly jurisdictions have been looking at this matter. Some have been able to do bonuses for folks who were deemed first responders, and then just bonuses in general. But certainly a cost of living increase, I think for the most part, at least 5% for the city of Richmond, and then looking at trying to get the salary up to $17 in this upcoming budget. So, I mean, this seems to be in line at 5.9%, and then the merit would be, if I understood correctly, would be given more as a bonus and not an ongoing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That would, that's the going proposal.
Right. So I would certainly like to see us take a look at, because everything is going up, folks are being impacted in any number of ways, and would certainly support and encourage our consideration of a cost of living. And then the merit, certainly in the form of a bonus, does not have that ongoing commitment to providing. So, yes, I would definitely support it.
Anyone else want to be heard on that? All right.
So I think what my objective today was to really get sort of a temperature from the executive committee about your comfort level. And then what we've been working, and what we will do is model that to see whether it's actually possible based on what we're projecting from a revenue perspective. So, examples of that are, we had kind of a wish list of positions and some things like that. And in this case, we think that compensation for our existing employees is more important than growing our staff in a couple different ways. So we're looking at sort of those trade-offs and trying to come forward, but we wanted to make sure that it didn't come and feel like it was a completely inconsistent with what's happening at the local level.
So, Mr. Chair, so I hear what you're saying. However, I think that we want to be mindful of, even though employees may want to be paid more, I think that even if we pay them more, but if we overload them with tasks, then it's not an advantage. As far as the budget, we're dead in the middle of our budget in New Kent. And so have we done a salary study, or have we compared salaries with other similar?
We've done some benchmarking with what's publicly available from the jurisdictions. I know that there was a big compensation evaluation that Chesterfield just completed. So I don't know whether we have the ability to do a lineup
Well, I mean, with other
comparison.
planning districts,
but-
have we done?
Yes,
Okay.
we also, I can tell you, benchmark pretty closely against VDOT, which has historically been one of our bigger competitors. And maybe you all know, we're not in their
No.
ballpark as far as salary competitiveness. So we do have a salary comparison that comes out every other year from the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions. And then we've done some kind of spot checking for comparable positions. And we've also been able to take advantage of some positions and their characterizations from kind of like this regional salary survey that was done. But a lot of the benchmarks are in the private sector. And so they're just so much higher than where we are. It's not apples to apples, but we've been trying to look at pretty much any source we can to do that comparison.
So you're looking at planning district commissions, VDOT, and our regional board salaries.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna bring this back to us when?
Finance committee will meet on the 26th, where we would put sort of the comprehensive budget proposal together, and then it would come back. So because the executive committee acts as the personnel committee and the finance committee acts as the finance committee, it feels like the two need to be sort of braided together of, what's the right thing to do from a personnel perspective, and then what's the financial reality of what's possible.
All right, well, we look forward to that.
So it won't, next time it comes to us, it'll come to us as a recommendation. Okay.
Yeah. So the finance committee takes the hard look at the budget. And they look all of the mechanics of what's happening, and we're looking at everything from what's happening. I think Mr. Davis aptly, we have forces that we cannot control around health insurance, and what that looks like. Those numbers are going up this year, and we don't have a say really in what that looks like. Then there's the compensation piece, and then there's most of our other costs. 80% of our expenses are in personnel and benefits. So, the other costs have influence, but they're not as a significant driver of how our budget works.
So I'll just share this last piece. The struggle with the climate with pay is just different now. So, Sean mentioned $15 minimum wage. When you look at the price of gas, look at the prices of homes, and just the competitiveness of salaries and what people are willing to do to get good employees these days. I know we want to be conservative, but we also don't want PlanRVA to be a funnel for VDOT or other places where people come get their feet wet. And we talked about this before, where people come, cut their chops here and then leave to go other places. So if we want to have any type of longevity, we have to seriously look at what we pay people.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, you don't want to be a training ground. We've seen that oftentimes, a number of us in our police departments and sheriff's office, we're a training ground for other folks. And I've told my constituents this, as you balance that out, I mean, you don't want the lowest bidder working for the people that they serve, right? I mean, you want to attract and retain quality folks. And so I think there's got to be an adjustment. I just don't know how you look at it. Maybe you just take it annually. In this case, you just say, okay, this is where we're going, but maybe this isn't something that's ongoing, or at least at that level that we index it. But I don't disagree, and I'm not opposed to it. I just wanted to hear everybody else's thoughts. So
This has been really helpful.
We've got two other positions here too.
Yeah, and so two of the things that we were looking at from a new position perspective, Mrs. Page heard you loud and clear. One idea that we've had, and we've been socializing this with local government staff, is this idea of having a person on staff that's dedicated to our small and rural localities. So we've heard, I think, time and time again from members of the jurisdictions that there are.
Frank say amen from somewhere.
I mean, there just are opportunities where, even the work that we're supporting, sometimes there just aren't enough hands on deck in the smaller jurisdictions to be able to tap in and dial in. And so we've been thinking about this concept of having a person on our team whose job it is to wake up every day and reach out to the folks in Goochland and New Kent and Powhatan and Charles City and Ashland, and sometimes maybe Hanover. It probably depends on how Hanover defines its needs, but really being able to kind of do that more outreach instead of waiting for people to get back to us. The idea would be that this person could be dedicated to help make sure that when our housing grant has applications open, there's a lot of support to be able to make sure that local jurisdictions know about that. When smart scale applications are coming up, or RSTP or CMAQ applications are coming up, there's awareness of what that process looks like, what additional support. Those are just examples of things that we know have been clunky in the past, and so we think that there's merit to that, and really just being able to do that kind of touch point. So this person would, in some respects, scan what's happening within this agency and make sure that across all of our programs, they are going out and meeting with local government folks in those jurisdictions to share what's happening and what those opportunities are, and then to be able to sit and listen and say, okay, what are your needs? How could we help? You've got a comp plan coming up. Maybe there's a way we could assist with that. You've got this, Safe Walks to School, program or something like that you want to do. How could we help with that? Be able to do kind of both directions of that communication. Chet and I have chatted about this a lot and thinking about kind of how we could structure this and how we could pilot this. The thought is that perhaps we could take some of our existing staff resources and pivot them to be focused on that. Many of you know Barbara Jaycock. She's a seasoned planner who frankly loves this kind of work. So we haven't talked explicitly about this, but could she be sort of that chief person that's really focusing and orienting that way? And then she would need resources and personnel resources. And so we thought about the idea of going back to the Wilder School at VCU and getting a graduate student to be her right hand, to be able to run down different leads and that kind of thing. This is not a permanent position, so it would create this mechanism for us to take this on as a pilot for a year, see how it works, kind of co-design and co-create this with the smaller jurisdictions and see if it works well. I'll just be candid, my thought is that if it works well enough, maybe the smaller jurisdictions could see the benefit of contributing maybe an additional couple $1,000 to help offset the cost of a full-time permanent position. My hope would be that the value that we brought would be well worth a $5,000 contribution split, across 4 or 5 jurisdictions, and then we're doing a kind of a cost share of a position in that regard. I don't know, I don't know whether that, what that feels like to you all, but that was the idea of a new position that could be created at PlanRVA to really try to be more responsive to what we're hearing from our local governments.
In terms of workload, is there adequate workload? This position, in other words, could just go to work and have enough work to keep
Yeah,
that person.
and I want to say this with as much candor as possible, but please hear me. This is in no way a critique of anybody. It's just the reality is that we hear, and I don't want to pick on Mr. Cota because he's not here, but we hear kind of time and time again that there's just not enough capacity at the local level to tap into some of these opportunities. And frankly, we don't have the capacity to do the follow-up I think that's necessary to really say we're sending emails, but 50 emails in somebody's already overloaded inbox isn't helping them with what they need. It's just overwhelming them with information that they don't have time to read through.
They'd be like a partner in getting these projects in some of these smaller jurisdictions across the line, if you will.
Yeah, I think Kelly's going crazy, trying to manage everything.
That's another whole story. Mr. Chairman,
Please.
so I'm going to defend Martha. Just calm down, Martha, I got you on this one. So my feelings are absolutely in support of it. I think that small localities want to know that they matter. Smaller localities, we don't have we have a planning department, but we don't have a transportation planning department, or we don't have a amount of employees that the larger jurisdictions have. So it's sort of who's on CTAC and who's your board representative. By the time I get to New Kid, there's no telling what I'm telling them. I'm telling them. I mean, it's just the reality of it. So to have a go-to person, you know, I mean, I've done the best I can, really. I just carried the whole thing and said, this is what we talked about. That's what, you know, and they don't have time to read that, you know. So I think that if we do it as a pilot program, absolutely,
Yeah.
I'm in support of it. I am also in support of not necessarily the smaller jurisdiction giving more money for this position, but because we are part of this organization, that the organization looks at how we're gonna fund this position. And so then we're included, and so then you're not being stretched, our planners are not being stretched, and everybody's getting the biggest bang for his buck. Did they help you? There you go. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to follow up on Ms. Page's comments. And I would be in support of it, to bring a person on for that. But I'm gonna kind of go back to the comments earlier about the cost of living, and as we all go through the budget, it's a difficult needle to thread, trying to figure out how to do that raise, and then how much is it to retain people, employees and staff. There's a cost involved with that. So the stability, kind of to what we were referring to earlier, that there's the expense of if they leave and they go to VDOT and we're the funnel, we don't want to be the funnel. How do we keep them? How do we measure that in terms of the dollars to get them to stay here? And as we were talking about that, I'm thinking, you know, there's also another side of this. You know, we're talking about we're going to the current. And as we go to the current, I remember the reasons we were going to the current, to make it appealing for the staff, you know, ride the bike, the shower, the coffee shop, all of those things come into play. And how do we measure all of it to where we have great employees, we retain them, and then we have stability? To the point of the adding another employee for the smaller localities, when I come to this room, whether I'm here with CVTA or PlanRVA, it's a team.
Yeah.
There's a team. And you know, when you're on a football team, there's 11 players that start. Then there's 20 more that sit and wait for their opportunity or are on the sideline. And we're the small guys, I get that. And you guys are the big guys. I don't mind being the second team, so to speak, to sit on the sideline, but I do want to be part of the team, and I want to feel like part of the team. And I think what I see and what I hear collectively through CVTA and my short time on that board, it seems like there's definitely a reach to do that. And so I applaud you for bringing that forward, to have somebody that looks at the small jurisdictions. And I hope that we can move forward with that in a manner that makes everybody work harder to be better and serve this region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I wanted to say what he said. I just couldn't get it out.
Dr. Newberry.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would concur. This pilot seems like an excellent idea to address many of the longstanding concerns about really engagement, involvement, outreach to our smaller jurisdictions. So I'd really like to see us move forward with the pilot. I think it's a great idea.
Sounds like you got support.
Okay, thank you for that.
How much was it again?
For a Wilder Fellow, the total fully loaded cost is, so the Wilder Fellow program is structured with a stipend to support the graduate work that the student is pursuing over the course of the academic year. And then there's an hourly rate. The total cost of that is right around $42,000, fully taxes, you know, and all of that. It's a non-benefit position. It's about 20 hours a week. So it's not inexpensive. I don't want to suggest that, but it is, it has been a tremendous asset to us. And as you know, we have hired a number of our Wilders. We have pursued permanent employment of all of our Wilders, and sometimes we just weren't able to get them in time.
It's a talent pipeline for us.
It's been great,
essentially,
yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Just one last comment to echo off that. I know in Powhatan, we've done some of that with some, offered some, at least reached out to VCU and the junior colleges around J. Sarge and Tyler and to find people that would be an intern or come in that wanted. And it is a great opportunity to sort of speak, excuse the phrase, get a test drive, you know, with those potential candidates to fill positions that come up later. So I like that a lot. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
absolutely. And then,
Yeah, so I'll just simply say, kind of on the heels of everything that you all have been talking about this morning, we have surveyed our staff extensively about what matters to them and how we can keep them. And I will say that the answers are layered. I'm tired, I'm overworked.
yeah, me too.
I have things I love to do and I want to do for my community, but I don't have time to do it. And I think some people say, I think I would be willing to sort of make more time if I had a little bit of help, or if I felt like I was being compensated at the level I'm being asked to perform. And so there's a different staff feel a little bit differently about that, but I think the general consensus is we need some extra hands on deck, but also I'm prepared to sort of move into a more intensive work situation, but I need to be compensated for that. Like I have value and I have worth, and that's what we've seen in our exit interviews, and that's what we've seen in our stay interviews. The space is very important, and I think, you know, we're making major strides quickly to be able to accommodate that. I know that this fall, Mr. Davis asked me to take a look at our kind of comprehensive benefits package, not just like what health insurance looks like, which is a topic that I'd like to bring up with you all, but also kind of the whole set. Our staff want to be recognized. They want to know you all. They want to be able to have, they don't want awards, I don't mean that, but like they want to be told thank you. You know, they want to know that the efforts that they're putting in matter to somebody, that matters to them, if that makes sense. So we're trying to find better ways to do that recognition. Publicly, they're a modest group of people, but they also, I think, you know, they want to feel like, and when you're planning for 2045, it's kind of hard to like pull in the satisfaction of that. So we need to find ways to say thank you to them more regularly and more often. And I think that would go a long way on the retention piece as well.
Martha, will these items under the employee benefits, that will also be reviewed by audit and finance for recommendation to us as well?
So we have, we've established kind of a framework for a pretty modest budget, but it actually could go a long way. I mean, things that came up in the conversations over the last month, like what if we did do a staff lunch once a month? You know, what if we did do recognitions in a more formalized way? Dr. Newbill, when you were chair, you asked me to put together a structure for anniversary recognitions. Staff members here want their birthday to be recognized. So how could we start to do those kinds of things? How could we do kudos, you know, and a little, you know, a Starbucks gift card or Blanchard's gift card, I guess, or something like that that's local, you know, right. That kind of a thing. So we're looking into that and coming up with a line item in the budget that's very clear and transparent, but could start to be responsive to that feedback that we've got. For this committee, for the work program for next year, you all saw the material about the Virginia Health Insurance Program last month. I'd like to bring a speaker in to talk with the executive committee about that. We would have about a year to evaluate whether that's a good option for us or not, but I just have to be candid, the savings potential is very attractive, particularly in light of what we're seeing in cost increases this year. So there's some work that we can do on the internal side. If you're okay with it, we could go ahead and evaluate whether the coverage is comparable to what we have now. We certainly wouldn't want our employees to all of a sudden find out that their providers, you know, just don't participate in this other network or something like that. And then continuing on that sort of perspective, I do have some personnel ideas that we've been talking a lot about our benefit structure. Should we think about offering some sort of benefits or benefit stipend for health insurance to part-time employees? That's a challenge I think you all face as well. Are there opportunities for people to kind of downshift from full-time to back to part-time if they're not, you know, if they're at a point in their life or their career where they want to still work? You know, could we create a mechanism like that to be able to recruit, retain talent and that kind of thing? So we're looking at some things like that that'll be coming to the committee over the next couple months as well. That's it.
And I'm just keeping an eyeball on the clock here, our leadership transition here. So think I need to appoint a nominating committee to make a recommendation for slate of officers. Which, I don't know how many people have been on that committee, I can't remember. in the
2 or
past.
3 typically.
We usually include the past chair. And who else?
I feel
Is it
like the last
opposition?
couple of years, it's been the 2 most recent past chairs. So that's what, were you the nominating, you and Dr. Newbill were the nominating committee last
I
year? I
think
can't
we
even
were.
remember.
I think, Dr. Newbill, were we the nominating committee
I
last year?
think they were.
I think we were. I think we were.
All right. Reverend Nelson's, I think it might be you and me. And
No, Spooner.
Spoon Hour. Do we, you want, okay, so we just, I'm sorry, 2, not 3. I'm sorry, I'm thinking too far back.
So it'd be, you and Spooner.
Yeah, all right. Well,
Oh, is it the current person or the?
I think so.
It's only been the past 2.
So,
Past two.
so it'll be me and Spooner.
Is that good?
Then it'll be
You okay with that?
It'll be
Next
Spooner,
time.
where you next time.
That's right. All right. I'll appoint then Reverend Nelson and Mr. Spoonhour to be the nominating committee. And I guess the timeline of this is,
He's an alternate. I don't think there'd be any issue with an alternate being a member of a committee, so
recommendations to be
if he
reported
agrees.
at the June meeting, or at least the June executive meeting, because it looks like the regular meeting, depending on the next discussion, may be canceled. So at least the June executive committee meeting, and then we'll go from there.
Is there another June meeting for the full body?
Well, we're gonna do that, that joint meeting.
So you need to have the election.
We've typically done it in July.
I really,
We've done the election and the swearing in the same meeting.
So
first meeting in
if
July.
we get a recommendation, the executive in June, and then we can move forward in July with the election. Does that sound all right with everybody? All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn this thing unless there's any other comment, and then we'll say 9:05.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.